Hilchos Maaser Sheini v'neta Rabbi Perek Revi, the laws of the second tithe and produce of the fourth year, chapter 4. Today, the topic is going to be what we see on the screen, what's called chilul or pidyon. Pidyon means redemption, chilul means to transfer. Essentially, it's the mechanism by which you take Maaser Sheini produce and you don't end up bringing that produce to Yerushalayim. Instead, you transfer the holiness onto money or onto other produce, as we're going to see, and the laws that surround that. So the Rambam begins, Halacha Aleph, Hareitze lifdeis peideis Maaser Sheini. If somebody wants to redeem, and we're going to see in this chapter mostly pidyon, the word redemption refers to redeeming it for money. So you want to transfer the holiness of Maaser Sheini produce onto money. Poide oisan bidmehen. You redeem them according to their worth. And we're going to see more details later in the chapter that ideally you should do it for the full value. After the fact, even if it's less, it's okay. But ideally you do it for the full worth. V'oimer, and you say, Hare hamois ha'elu, tachas ha'peiros ha'elu. These money come instead of this produce. Or you say it about the fruit. The Maaser Sheini produce is transferred to the money. Same idea. Whether the money goes in place of the produce or the produce transfers to the money, the bottom line is the same. If you didn't say the words explicitly, you just put aside money instead of the produce, that's enough. And there's no need to be explicit. Ideally, you should be explicit, but if you weren't, as long as you put the money aside, it's okay. The produce of Maaser Sheini now goes out to being considered regular chulin, mundane produce. And you simply take the money to Jerusalem, spend them there, and buy stuff and treat it as holy Maaser Sheini. How do we know this is an option? Shenemar, because it says, if the road is too much, you're not able to carry it. In other words, you have too much Maaser Sheini, you live far away, there's no way to get it all to Jerusalem. And the pasuk continues, we don't have it in the Rambam, but the pasuk continues, Ki yirchak mimcha amakayim, the place is too far that Hashem chose, then you put it into money. Halacha beis v'chein im ratza lechalil, peiros hamaiser al peiros acheros. So here the Rambam doesn't use the word pidyon, he doesn't use the word redemption, he uses the word chilul. Chilul means transfer. You want to transfer the Maaser Sheini produce to other produce, yalu ha-peiros hashniyos v'ya'achlu b'Yerushalayim. Take the second round of produce and have it eaten in Jerusalem, it's okay. However, when you transfer produce to produce, v'lo yechalil mimin al she'enei minoi, you're not allowed to transfer from one species to another species. V'lo min hayofa al hara v'afilu ba'isei hamin. Neither should you transfer from better quality produce to worse quality produce, even if it's the same species. Ideally, you should always go upwards. You say you have lesser quality wheat, but in Jerusalem they should use higher quality wheat. So you transfer the Maaser to higher quality wheat, that's good. After the fact though, if you transfer to different species or different qualities, it's okay. Halacha Gimel hapoide Maaser Sheini. When somebody redeems Maaser Sheini, it's literally a mitzvah. Mevarech, you have to make a blessing. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu al pidyon Maaser Sheini. Hashem commanded us with His mitzvahs, and He sanctified us with His mitzvahs, and He commanded us to redeem the Maaser Sheini. V'imchilalan al peiros acheros. If you're transferring produce to other produce, or later on, after transferring the produce to money, you transfer the money onto other produce, mevarech, at that point you make a blessing, al chilul Maaser Sheini, the blessing of transferring Maaser Sheini. The Rabbi has a very interesting point that he makes here. You see that Rambam in the first blessing tells you the whole text, Asher kichanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu. Later on, just gives you al chilul Maaser Sheini. Why? The Rambam wants to bring out that redeeming Maaser Sheini is not a second-class citizen type of an act. It's not like ideally you bring it to Jerusalem. If you couldn't do it, okay, you end up with a lower option of redeeming it. No, when Hashem made the rules of Maaser Sheini, he said there's two options, equal mitzvahs, equal kitchanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu. The same way He commands us to eat it in Yerushalayim, He also commands us to redeem it when it's time to redeem it. And we're going to see more about this in chapter 7. If somebody redeems or transfers Maaser Sheini produce that was questionable to begin with, you only separated it because you bought it from an unlearned Jew, you weren't sure if he took the Maaser, in this case, you don't need to have a blessing because it's not a definite mitzvah. Halacha Dalet, Kishepoidin es ha-Maaser. When you redeem Maaser onto money, Ein poidin oisei l'shem Maaser, elo l'shem chulin. Interesting halacha. When you talk about it, you shouldn't say, I'm redeeming it for Maaser. I'm doing this for Maaser Sheini produce. You should talk about it as ordinary produce, since in the end of the day, it's going to become ordinary produce.
So how do you do that practically?
Practically. V'oimren, and you say, Kama shavin peiros chulin elu. When you come to the market to redeem it, you say, how much would this produce be in ordinary produce? Even if everybody knows that it's Maaser. Why don't you want to say that it's Maaser? So the Maaser shouldn't be degraded.
The Maaser itself?
Yes. So the commentaries debate what this means, that it shouldn't be degraded. The simple understanding, the Mari Kurkus, he says that if you publicize the redemption process, it could be degrading for the Maaser. People should think that Maaser Sheini is treated holy and not redeemed. The Gra, the Vilna Gaon, says that we're talking about a case not where a person is classically redeeming the Maaser, but where he's trying to sell it. Ideally, you're not supposed to sell Maaser Sheini. He's trying to sell it. So, if you notify the buyer that you're selling him Maaser Sheini, so you degrade the process. If you don't notify him, he thinks he's buying ordinary produce, and halachically it's no problem, because at the end of the day, once he buys it, it does become regular chulin, so he doesn't have to know that it's Maaser Sheini, and this way you avoid embarrassment. The Smag is another opinion. He says, it looks like you're doing business with Maaser Sheini produce, which is not allowed. But the Ravid, who's the primary commentator here, he says, no. How could the Rambam mean that? Why should redeeming Maaser be degrading? It's a mitzvah. We just talked about it. It's an actual mitzvah to redeem it when you want to. So he has a different understanding where he says that somehow people treat Maaser Sheini Maaser Sheini produce with less financial worth. Since it has to be eaten with certain limitations and different laws, so automatically people will pay less for Maaser Sheini, even if they know that what they're going to buy it is going to become regular grain. It's not going to be chulin. It's not going to be Maaser Sheini. Doesn't matter. Knowing that it's Maaser Sheini makes them approach it with less seriousness. And therefore, we don't want to publicize that it's Maaser Sheini. And actually, some commentators say that that's maybe what the Rambam means himself. When the Rambam says Shalo Yizbaze, he means we don't want it to be degraded and treated more cheaper just because it's Maaser Sheini. Says the Rambam Halacha Hey. When we talk about transfer, there's a number of ways to transfer. So the typical way is to take produce and transfer it to money, or to take produce and transfer it to produce. Those are the two that we spoke about before. Now that Rambam says, Ein mechalalin moyes Maaser Sheini al moyes acheres. If you have Maaser Sheini money, in other words, you transferred produce onto money, and now all you have is money, so you should not transfer that money onto other money.
Not mingling it.
I'm saying don't make a second level of money. Once you have the money, take that money to Jerusalem. Yeah.
So you don't mingle it with something?
Huh? You don't move it to other money. Yeah. Bein shahayu elu va'elu kesef, whether both coins are silver, or elu va'elu nechayshes, or both are copper over here. Oy harishonis kesef v'hashnias nechayshes, oy harishonis nechayshes v'hashnias kesef. Maybe the first ones are silver, second ones are copper, first ones are copper, second ones are silver. Even if it seems like you're going upwards, doesn't matter. Once you've moved the holiness of Maaser Sheini onto money, leave it with that money. If you went ahead and you did transfer it to another level, okay, after the fact, we're not going to make a big deal. But ideally, you shouldn't do that. Halacha vav, ein mechalelin me'ois maaser al haperes. You're not supposed to transfer Maaser Sheini money to produce before you come to Yerushalayim. Of course, once you get to Yerushalayim, that's the whole point. You take the money and you buy produce. The Rambam's point over here is before. Once you've transferred the Maaser Sheini produce to money, take that money straight to Yerushalayim. Don't be transferring it to other produce. V'im chilel, if you did transfer it, well then, again, after the fact, it's okay. Yalu ha'peres v'yachlu b'Yerushalayim. Take the produce up, eat it in Jerusalem. You should not take the money and transfer it to live animals, beasts, or birds. V'im chilel, and in this case, even if you did, loy kana maaser. Maaser Sheini has not acquired it. Money doesn't transfer to livestock. Why? Shema yegadol mehem adarim adarim. If you have a live animal, You're not going to be motivated to bring it to Yerushalayim. It's live. Let's let it grow up. Let's let it have kids. And then later I'll take it to Yerushalayim. Meanwhile, that's a big problem. Because you have Maaser Sheini stuff which could very easily be eaten outside of Jerusalem. So the sage just said, never is transfer allowed to live animals. But if you transferred Maaser Sheini money to slaughtered meat, that's like any other fruit. Take them up, eat them in Yerushalayim, put the money into chulin. It's okay after the fact. In other words, ideally, again, don't do it. But if you did it, in this case, it's fine. Halacha zayin bishas hadchak. Even though we said before, one of the cases here, that silver onto copper, you're not supposed to do. Says the Rambam bishas hadchak, in pressing circumstances, muter lechalil ma'is hakesef al shel nechoshes. It's allowed to transfer silver money to copper money. What's an example of a pressing situation? The Rambam will talk about it in 2 days from now, is if you have Maaser Sheini money that got mixed with other money. So you had a silver coin put aside, and it got mixed with other silver coins. So now what you have to do is you have to transfer the holiness that's somewhere in the mixture to another coin. In that case, it's allowed to transfer from silver to copper. However, not to keep it that way. Till you find some breathing space, so to speak, till you find more opportunity with silver coins. Then you go back and transfer the copper money back to the silver money. Halacha ches, Maaser Sheini shel demai. If the whole Maaser Sheini was questionable, it came from questionable produce, then mechalel Maaser lechatchila, kesef al kesef, kesef al nechoshes, nechoshes al nechoshes, or nechoshes al aperis. Then even initially you can make all these changes: silver to silver, silver to copper, copper to copper, copper to produce. In the final stage, whatever is at the end, produce, you take it to Jerusalem and you eat it there. Halacha tes. This money that you use, there's some laws about the money. Says the Rambam here, Ein paidin peiris Maaser ella bekesef. First of all, you have to only redeem Maaser produce to silver coinage. Here it is. I should have put silver coins. Shenemar v'tzarta hakesef. Because it says in the other verse, okay, I made a mistake here, put copper coins over here. V'tzarta hakesef means you have to tie up or take a bundle of silver in your hand. It says kesef. Kesef means money, but kesef also means silver. Same thing if you redeem the Maaser Sheini for yourself, in which case you have to add a fifth, as we'll see later in later chapters. The additional fifth has to be silver, like the principle. We also don't use what's called unminted coins. Today it's almost unheard of. But they used to have just like a copper or a silver blob, shaped like a coin maybe, but it wasn't minted. There was no, what do they call them? Blanks. So, yeah, blank, like a blank piece of metal. So the Rambam says, "Ve'ein paidin bekesef she'einem matbeya." You cannot redeem it with money or with silver that isn't minted. Ela bekesef mefutach. It has to be engraved or minted silver. Sheyesh alav tzura iksav, that has either a form or a writing. Shenemar v'tzarta hakesef. The word v'tzarta literally means bundle, but the word tzarta also comes from tziur, which means form or image. Has to have an image. V'impada b'lashin shel kesef. Huh? That's the initial meaning. Tzura, like a bundle. Yeah, but it also comes from the word tzura, which means picture. If you redeemed it simply with like bullion, right? What do they call, like just a plain piece of silver? It's called asimoin. That's the Hebrew terminology for it. Loy asa klum. You've done nothing. It's a meaningless transaction. You also cannot redeem for money less than a pruta worth, less than the smallest copper coin. Because that's like redeeming onto unminted or blank or bullion that has no mint on it. Halacha yot. Ein paidin b'matbeya she'eina yoytze ba'oisei zman u'ba'oisei makom. You cannot redeem with coinage that's not legal tender at that time in place. Okay, so we have here, right? This is the 2021 dime. That's the common coinage, but this is from 1890. Nobody's going to take this, right? It has to be usable money in that time, in that place. Shenemar, because it says v'nosato hakesef. The point of taking the money to Jerusalem is that later on you're going to put the money into whatever you want. which means ad sheyir roi lo hitzah.
I think in this case, Rabbi.
1890 will work in the
yeah.
bank.
No, that will work. It's just that it's just worth so much more than
So it's actually better.
yeah, but it will.
Okay.
And the dimes are exactly the same in terms of weight in the United States, which you're talking about.
So maybe it was a bad
Better
example.
example.
Ad sheyir roi lo hitzah. It needs to be fitting for spending. Umatbeya melachim harishaynim, coins from earlier kings. Im yoytze mishmam paidin bay. If they still go around in their name, in other words, if it's still circulated, you can use it to redeem. It doesn't have to be the current currency, but it has to be usable currency. Yud Aleph, einay paida b'mois she'einon birshusay. You cannot redeem with money that's not in your possession. Now, not in your possession means not accessible. Okay? It doesn't mean that it's not in your hand, because we're going to see later that if you have coins in your home and you're not at home, you can still use it for redemption. Point is that it's not accessible. Shenemar v'tzarto hakesef biyodcha. Says you have to tie the money into your hand. And in these cases, it wouldn't be in your hand. Nafal kisei leboir. V'hu yachal lahitziyai. If your wallet fell into a pit and you can take it out, paidabay mipnei shu birshusa. You can still redeem it with it because it's in your possession. Here you see right away. As long as you can get it out of the pit, you're good. I tried finding a picture of a wallet in a pit. I couldn't find it. I asked AI to make me a picture, and it gave me like the Grand Canyon with like a wallet inside it. So I figured I'd just put it up here just for fun. But I don't think the Grand Canyon would be an example of where you can get it out. Point is, if you can get it out, it's accessible, that's okay. Halacha Yud Beis Haya ba baderech u'moyes biyadei. Person is traveling, he's got money in his hand, ve'anos ba kenegdei, and he can see from far. There's a forceful robber that's coming towards him. The thing is now, he's going to lose his money. So he wants to get whatever he can for it. So he wants to use it now to transfer Maaser Sheini produce in his house onto this money. Can you do that? So the Rambam says, Im yachal lahatzal yadei adchak, if he'll be able to save himself from this robber, with difficulty at least, you can use the money to redeem produce in your home. But if not, you know for sure you're going to lose the money. And you still said, the produce that I have in my hand is transferred to this money. You've said nothing. Because you're anyways going to lose it, it's not considered to be in your hand. A person put aside a stack of cash, and he says, you know what, I'm only going to Jerusalem in 6 months. But for now, whatever produce I bring in, I'll keep on transferring my Maaser Sheini onto that money, and eventually I'll take all the money to Yerushalayim. So you can always use it as redemption money, presuming they're still there. If later on you find they were lost, then you have to worry retroactively that whatever you used was not good, and you have to redeem it again onto other money. Halacha Yudalit. Misha haya oimed b'Tvaria, v'yesh lo mois Bavel biBavel. A person is standing in the city of Tiberias in Israel, and he has Babylonian money in Babylon. Okay, Babylon would be like this area of Iraq. Okay, people used to travel very often from Babylon to Israel. So the guy is in Israel with Maaser Sheini produce. He has Babylonian coins in Babylon. Einay mechalel aleihem. Here, you cannot use that money to transfer the fruit. Why? So the commentators explain what's called tartil ligreus. So you have two negative factors here. Number one is it's not legal tender in the place where you are. Where you are, it's Israel. Babylonian coinage can't be used in Israel. Number two, it's not in your possession. It's in your home, but because together with not being in your possession, it's also not legal tender where you are, so we say it doesn't work. If you had Tiberias money in Babylon, now you only have one negative factor. It's not in your possession, but it's good coinage where you are, and therefore and you can transfer the money, the produce, using that money.
Transfer the money.
In your head. All you have to do is say, the money in my house becomes holy, and I'm going to bring it to Yerushalayim the next time I come back. Anything similar, same laws apply. Halacha tezvav ha'omer. A person says, Maaser Sheini mechulal al sela shetale biyadi mikiseh. Here's my coin of money. I'm about to pick out a random coin. Whichever coin I pick, that's going to be the one that my Maaser Sheini is going to be transferred to. Or Al Sela She'efreit Midinar Zahav Zeh. Or I have a golden coin. I'm going to exchange it for silver coins, because every golden coin was worth a couple of silver coins. And I'm going to pick one randomly. One of those silver coins is going to be the one that my Maaser Sheini is transferred. Or Al Pundyain She'efreit Misela Zeh. I have a sela, I have a silver coin. I'm going to exchange it for pundyains, which are smaller coins. And I'm going to pick one, and that's going to be the Maaser Sheini transfer. Harei Zeh Chilel. It does work. Even though you don't have it in your possession right now and you only know what you're going to pick later, it works with the principle of Berera, retroactive clarification. V'sela shetale b'yodei oishe yifrei tihi Maaser. And the sela which you end up with, or which you exchange, becomes Maaser Sheini. The principle of Berera, I should really correct what I said, it influences the fact that it's going to be retroactively Maaser Sheini. The fact that the mechanism works on its own is a self-standing law. Tezayin. Amar, a person says, Harei Maaser mechulal al sela shehoisa b'yad b'ni. I know that my son had a silver coin. I want to transfer my Maaser holiness onto that coin. Lo chilal doesn't work. Shema lehoisa b'yadei ba'isa shah. Very possible that it wasn't in his son's hand. You don't know what your son has a coin. Maybe he lost it. Maybe he threw it away. You can't rely on it. Halacha Yudzayin hapoidem Maaser Sheini koidem sheyafri shenu. A person redeems Maaser Sheini before actually having separated it. He has a pile of produce from which he needs to separate 10% for Maaser Sheini. He didn't separate it yet. And he says, Maaser Sheini shall pay this elu, padi b'moyes elu. The Maaser Sheini that's going to come out of this produce is transferred to this money. Le'amar klum v'le'kava Maaser. You have said nothing, you don't establish the Maaser. Avalim kava, but if you at least designated it somewhere in the pile, v'amar, and you said, Maaser Sheini shalahen b'tzafein oy b'darim, mechul ala moyes elu. The Maaser Sheini in this pile is going to be on the north side or the south side, and it's transferred to the money. Harei zeh padi, that is indeed a good redemption. Halacha Yudches, Keshepoidin Maaser Sheini, Poidin Oiseh b'Shavyai. Ideally, when you redeem Maaser Sheini for money, you must redeem it for its actual worth. V'yesh le'livdeis b'shar hazoil. However, when deciding its worth, you can use the lower market price, meaning kemois shehachen v'ni lekeach v'loi kemois shehu moicher. As the retail owner buys, not as he sells. Everyone understands, right? When a retail buys from a wholesaler, you buy from a lower price, then you mark it up in your store to make the profit. So you have the wholesaler selling him $10 per pound. He's selling it off for $15 per pound. So how do you decide what the worth of the pound is? So the Rambam over here says you can go with the rate that the store owner buys for, the $10 per pound, not what he sells for. V'neisan hamois, or you can give the money, kemois sha'ashulchani peiret, like kemois shehu mitzaref, as the money changer will give, not what he will take. Money changers to make money. If you wanted a higher currency, let's say you wanted a sela for 25 smaller silver coins, you had to give the full 25 to get the sela. But if you wanted to give the sela and get 25 coins, they'd only give you 24 coins. That was the rate of exchange. So you can go with the lower rate, what he gives, not what he charges. After the fact, if you transgressed and you transferred money, produce worth a money, 100 coins, into a tiny copper coin, or you transferred produce to other produce that was worth much less, as we saw the other day, it works. If the sela was missing a sixth of itself, or it was less of its standard weight, yes, 1/6. They used to have, today everything is exactly equal with the mint, but coins in those days were less fancy. Not all of them were minted the exact same. Plus, wear and tear could influence the weight. So once you have a coin which is missing a sixth of its size or of its weight, if it was still circulating with difficulty, you can transfer produce worth a sela to it with no worry. If you redeem with a sela and then it turned out later that it was bad quality, just exchange it later, it's no problem. We don't redeem Maaser Sheini with approximation. Be exact. Find out its weight, find out its volume, and give the money. If it was a fixed, if its price was known, in other words, it was a fixed market thing, that can be redeemed based on one person telling you what the price is. But if it's a thing that doesn't have a fixed market value, the worth is not exactly known, wine that begins to become vinegar, peiros shehir kivu, produce that's beginning to spoil, or mois shehechlidu, money that's beginning to rust. There's no set value for it. Yipadal pishleisha tagarim, you have to have 3 merchants that are going to appraise it and give you the value. Even if one of them was a non-Jew, or the owner of the Maaser Sheini itself, he can be on the board of the appraisal board. Afilu ish ushtei nashov, paidin al piyam. Even a man with his 2 wives can be the board. The kaifin as habaylim liftei achrishan, and we force the owners to give the first bid of redemption. V'zeh chaymer b'maaser min ha'hekdesh. This is a stringency in Maaser Sheini over consecrated property, where we don't force the owner to give the first bid. That's a simple meaning of that line, although the commentaries question it, because the Rambam, in the laws of consecration, said that the owner has to give the first bid over there also as well. Maybe it's not about forcing, but there's some discussion on the commentaries over here. Halacha Chaf Aleph. When you choose to redeem your Maaser onto money, ein moilichin peiros Maaser mimakom lemakom lifdaisam sham. You can't transfer the produce before you redeem it. Say, in Sherman Oaks, apples are worth this much. But no, I'll bring it to the city, and maybe the transfer will be different, the rate of transfer. You can't do that. You can't bring your produce elsewhere to create a different rate of transfer. After the fact, if you transfer from a more expensive place to a cheaper place, or a cheaper place to a more expensive place, you have to do the rate of the place where you are redeeming it. If the produce was questionable, you can use whatever is the cheaper rate, because anyways it's going to be sold for a cheaper rate. If a person had Maaser Sheini produce in his granary, and he spent money from his own home till he brought them to the city, and therefore they became more expensive. Today, again, it's hard for us to understand this, but in those days, the grain was typically in the field outside the city. If somebody spent money to bring the grain to the city, that would automatically raise the price. So you have a guy who has Maaser Sheini produce, he worked to bring it to the city, therefore it became more expensive. Too bad on him. If he wants to transfer the Maaser Sheini produce to money, he needs to use the current more expensive rate, and he loses his expenses. Whatever he put out, too bad on him. You've brought it to the city to make it more expensive, the Maaser gains and has to be redeemed for more money.